Hi guys, Rob Roderick, National Tile Contractors Association. I'm with Mr. Roberson of David Allen Company here in North Carolina, and he's just spent this whole morning showing us around the place, and I want to thank you for having us, and thank you for spending this time to answer a couple questions. So one of the questions I had for you is, first off, tell me and our audience a little bit about David Allen Company.
Okay. Well, I'll start with David Allen himself, because he was a major player in the company as long as he was personally involved. And because he started his trade as a mason. His father was a mason, and he became a mason. And at the age of 14, he was a journeyman mason. His father died when he was still young, and he became the head of the household. In 1920, he had some experiences as a mason doing tile work around fireplaces. In that period of time, almost every room had a fireplace, and you'd start off with the most public areas and doing the fancy work. So as a skilled and unusually gifted mason, he was often called on to do those little tile faces and hearths. So that got him involved in the tile business. So in 1920, he established it as a company and predominantly focused on tile work. And then soon thereafter he added terrazzo, and marble was in the equation early on too, because there's fireplaces, some had marble, some had tile. And he operated as a proprietorship for a number of years, and in 1957 I started to work with him on a temporary job. Just finished school, and I had a job with the Pilot Life Insurance Company that was going to start in 90 days. So I just needed a 90-day job. So it fit his pattern because he needed someone for 90 days. It turns out that the person I was replacing did not return. A number of things took place during that period of time, and I decided to stay on sort of in an indefinite way. And it sort of became more and more, I was less focused on pursuit of another job, and I was beginning to learn a few things, and felt that this could possibly be a career here. So that would be 1957. About 1958, 59, the manager left on pretty short notice. And at that time, the only people in the office was David Allen, the manager, Paul Lyons, and myself. With Paul's departure, David Allen asked me to assemble all of the guys for 5:30 morning assembly. 5:30 was work time back then. And I remember when he came across the yard and walked up to the warehouse, and the guys were sitting around on bags of terrazzo chips and boxes of tile, like a little amphitheater. And he said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. Lyons is no longer with us, and Mr. Roberson is the manager." Well, of course, that raised a lot of questions in my mind because I hadn't been training to be a manager, but I had enjoyed my involvement enough to realize that I could make this work probably. But I had some real reservations about my ability to operate a company, because at that time, Mr. Allen's health was declining, so I could see he may not be standing beside me, walking me through this process. And that turned out to be the case. But in those next few years, under his leadership and the gentleman that he had working for him since his very beginning, even when he was a mason, who had taken a leave of absence and got a civil engineering degree from the university, but came back to work doing the same thing he'd been doing for years before. And he was a master craftsman in tile, marble, and terrazzo. So he actually tutored me just individually. He was in the office, he had no responsibility. In fact, he told me, "I don't mind helping you, but I don't come here to do your job or you won't ever learn the job." So he would be available. Sometimes, he was like 78 years old, And at 78 years old, you can take a nap anytime you want to, you know, and often when you don't want to. So more times than one, I would wake him up sometimes to ask a question, but for the most part, he would watch me. He taught me all. Back then, you had the mud coat, the scratch coat, the flow coat, the bond coat, and all that stuff. So everyone had a different ratio of lime, cement, and so forth. So he taught me all those formulas. He taught me how to estimate. He checked all of my work. He listened to my side of the phone conversations. He checked all my correspondence and just tutored me while Mr. Allen was spending a good bit of time recovering from surgery on his ankle. So things began to work, actually, and I became very encouraged. And Mr. Allen's health prevented him from coming back into the company, being an effective part of it. So in 1967, I bought the company, and it was a proprietorship right up to that moment. So we incorporated, and then in 1960, that'd be 67, somewhere in the later 60s, I hired Don Scott. I mentioned Don Scott because his name had come up again in the association relationship. And then later I hired my brother to manage the terrazzo operation about a year later. And at that point, I was sort of liberated to become more of the leader, not so much hands-on. I was able to develop a team. And from the very beginning, David Allen was a part of the establishment, a charter member of the Southern Tile, Marble, and Terrazzo Contract Association, predecessor to the National Tile Contractors. And he was always involved in the association, and he would take me to some of the meetings. And I could see that he gained a lot from it. And one of the things that I didn't place so much value on at that time, but I do now, just that he would sit around in just conversation, talking about the industry and the trade. And he was just picking up so much information from other people, even though he was considered an expert himself, and I'm sure the other people were gaining a lot of knowledge too. But that interaction taught me the value of associations and involving yourself with other people in the trade. So later I became the president of the Southern Association. Don't remember the years and all this stuff. And then several more years later, I became the president again, and that's when we became a national association. I saw that there was no representation on a national level for a tile contractor that was not a union member. So I encouraged that to take place with the Southern Association. Of course, prior to that, when I was a vice president, I hired Joe Tarver. So his and my relationship go back to somewhere in the early 60s. Yeah. So in the process of becoming involved in the association, I began to benefit from some of the same things I'd seen David Allen himself benefit from. And that's about that time is when we established the handbook. I was appointed to the technical committee, I think, before I was the vice president, I'm not sure. And the technical committee at that point was 3 people who at the annual meetings would say, we don't have a report, we don't have anything to add to the agenda. But I saw a lot of opportunity because I was benefiting from just a conversation with other contractors. And I was thinking, well, if we could get these guys together and address the issues that the association are having, I think it'd be worth the time and effort. So I immediately increased the technical committee to 20 people across the board, manufacturers, representatives, technically oriented people. And from that, I really began to see the value of what working together through an association could bring to any company. So have I elaborated enough on that
You
subject?
certainly have, and I appreciate all that information. What a terrific history of the NTCA and other associations. I do have just one other question, though, I'd like to ask. You know, you showed me around this beautiful campus that you have for your business, and you guys just recently celebrated 100 years.
100 years, yes.
That's fantastic. And you know, we travel all over the country, and we speak to tile contractors all over the United States, and lots of times we'll run into younger contractors that are just starting out in business. So if you had one piece of advice that you would give them, I mean, to be successful, what would that piece of advice be?
Well, of course, the NTCA is the premier tile association. I would say, as quickly as you get your feet on the ground, connect yourself with this tile association. There's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot you don't know, even though you think you're an expert already. There's 1,000 other heads out there that's got another story to tell, another piece of information, another valued idea that you can benefit from. So get to know these people. They won't necessarily be your competitors because it's geographically spread in a way that you can talk confidentially about your business to someone in California or Michigan. So that is a tremendously valuable resource. I believe in it so much that not only was I the president of the association for 2 years, Don Scott, who was my vice president, was the president for 2 years. Let's see. Well, Chris, a DC manager, was the president for 2 years. Maybe overlooking somebody there.
Martin Howard as well.
Martin, that's right. Martin Howard. So we have a long history as a contractor. We also have a very long history as being very much connected to the Tile Association.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Robertson, for all your time. Guys, what a terrific story of one mason started laying tile 100 years later. What a fantastic business. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you guys for viewing.
Well, thank you guys for the work you do and for making the association work for everybody.
Thank you so much, and God bless you.
Thank you. Bye.